In this lesson, you'll be introduced to a number of primate species to get a sense of the variation in the primate order. You'll also learn about how taxonomy helps us to make important biological statements about the adaptations within and between different primate groups so that we can get a better understanding of the evolutionary relationships among them. Now, the primate order is divided into two suborders. They are the Prosimians, the more primitive primates, and their name means pre-monkeys and include lemurs, lorises, bush babies, and possibly tarsiers, and the anthropoids. You should recognize part of that term, anthro meaning human-like, which includes monkeys, apes, and humans. And this grouping makes the statement that biologically and evolutionarily speaking, all the prosimian species are more closely related to one another than any of them are to the anthropoids. And likewise, monkeys, apes, and humans share more in common with each other, anatomically, genetically, and behaviorally, than any of them do with the more primitive prosimians. The prosimian primates, then, are going to depart from that general primate pattern that we just covered in the last lesson. And as I mentioned, they are the most primitive of the primates, but that word doesn't mean less developed or less evolved. It just means they're going to have features that are going to resemble that ancestor to the primates, that tree shrew-like ancestor, like Jeremiah. And so we see them with smaller bodies and with very different sensory anatomy that has implications for their behavior. The prosimian primates rely more on their sense of smell or olfaction, and we see this reflected in the skeletal anatomy by the longer snouts and by having a moist, fleshy nose that helps to really enhance their sense of smell. They tend to mark their territory with scent, very similar to the way cats and dogs do. This is a prosimian, and you can see from its protruding snout that all of the sensory anatomy that supports olfaction, or the sense of smell, is much more developed. Having the nose stick out here in front of the face also helps to enhance the sense of smell, and the moist, fleshy nose picks up scent particles in the environment, again telling us that smell is a lot more important for the prosimians. In their activity patterns, the prosimians are nocturnal. They're active at night. And you'll see this again reflected in the skeletal anatomy, where they have large eyes, which are not protected by any bony anatomy. So again, it's telling you vision is not that important for them. And so we don't see the same enhancements to vision that we see in the higher primates and the anthropoids. They don't have color vision because they're active at night, so there's no need to see in color. Being active at night allows them to obtain their favorite food source, which is generally insects. So here, because of this dietary preference, we do see differences in their dental structure or dental anatomy. Their teeth tend to be very sharp and a bit more specialized than we see in other primates. And in order to be effective predators for capturing insects, it works best for them to be solitary so that they don't drive their prey away, and also so that they don't draw attention to themselves. Another more primitive feature of the prosimians is that they have claws instead of nails, so not quite the same enhancement to their sense of touch as we see in other primates. The largest group of prosimians are the lemurs, of which there are more than 30 different species, all of which can only be found on the island of Madagascar. And since they have evolved separately from other prosimian species, this means they are going to depart from that general prosimian pattern we just covered. They don't have to compete with other primates, and so they have very different behavioral patterns. Starting with the fact that they're diurnal. They're active during the day, as you can see from these photos. In their dietary patterns, they're very opportunistic. They're omnivores. And in locomotion, they do have some of those specialized locomotive patterns of vertical clinging and leaping, very powerful hind legs. Although the ring-tailed lemur is a very terrestrial species and tends to be an a terrestrial quadruped. Here are some more typical prosimian species, the loris and the galago. And you can see from the photos that their big eyes give away their prosimian status. That's telling you these primates are nocturnal.
That brings us to a rather interesting primate species, the tarsier, which because of its mix of characteristics causes a bit of a taxonomic dilemma. It has characteristics in common with both the prosimians and the anthropoids, and even has some unique features all its own. This makes it difficult to know which suborder to group it with. But it's important to remember that humans are the ones that are creating these taxonomic categories, and nature doesn't always abide by our definitions or fit neatly into our boxes and categories.
So if we take a look at the tarsier in these visuals here, just on immediate appearance, he looks kind of like a prosimian. And so some of the prosimian features that the tarsier has are the fact that he's small-bodied, nocturnal, as you can see by those big eyes, and a vertical leaper. But the anthropoid features that the tarsier has include having a dry nose, which would mean that they're less reliant on their sense of smell, having limited color vision, and independent control of their fingers. And some of the unique characteristics that the tarsier has include the fact that this teeny tiny little primate is the only totally carnivorous primate. They eat lizards, frogs, and lots of insects. And although this next feature isn't completely unique to tarsiers, it is a very rare kind of pattern to see in the primate order and for mammals in general, and that is the formation of monogamous pairs. These monogamous pairs mate together for life and both take care of the offspring. And because the tarsier are so tiny, they can't transport their young around with them as they're off hunting for food. So they use the trees as their babysitters, and they park their young while they're out foraging and then return with food. And the tarsier is also known as the primate owl because its eyes are so enormous that they can't move or swivel independently in the eye socket. So if the tarsier wants to see around it, it has to move its head, and it can do this by rotating it 180 degrees in each direction. That brings us to the anthropoids, which include monkeys, apes, and humans. And here are some of the characteristics that define this suborder. These primates tend to have a larger body size. Along with that, larger brains. Their activity patterns are diurnal. They have enhanced color vision. That brings us to the anthropoid suborder, which includes monkeys, apes, and humans. And here are some of the characteristics that they share. 1. They have a larger body size than the prosimian primates. Along with that, larger brains, which is going to mean that we're going to see some more highly intelligent and complex behaviors develop. They have a diurnal activity pattern. And because they're day active, they have enhanced color vision. Unlike the prosimians that tend to be solitary, the anthropoids mostly live in social groups. Although they are generally omnivorous, their most favorite food is fruit. And because they rely less on smell and more on vision, they have dry noses. Now, the anthropoids can be broken down into two different groups, which is the New World monkeys and the Old World monkeys. Now, the differences between the New World or Platyrrhine monkeys and the Old World or Catarrhine monkeys are not just geographic as maybe the name implies, although they are found specifically in those regions of the world. So New World monkeys are only found in the Americas, and the Old World monkeys can be found in Africa and Asia and some in Europe. These differences are also anatomical and behavioral. So let's meet the most primitive group of New World monkeys, and these are the marmosets and tamarins. Now again, when we hear that word primitive, it's telling us that they're going to have more ancestral-like features, which means they're going to resemble the prosimians more. That's why they are a bit smaller than most other monkeys. They retain that feature of having claws. Like many of the prosimian species, they tend to be insectivores, but they also use their teeth to scrape into the bark of trees to extract gum. Like the prosimians, they use scent marking to mark their territory. The norm for marmoset and tamarin monkeys is twin births. They do form monogamous pairs, which again is relatively rare in the primate and mammalian groups of animals. And these beautiful, small, brightly colored monkeys are some of the most highly endangered monkey species. They're losing their homes to deforestation in the areas in which they live. This next slide covers some of the more typical New World monkeys, and you can review some of these features here. On the last one, the capuchin monkeys have been documented to use tools to crack nuts. You can go into the iLearn and under this lesson, view the clip that shows the capuchin monkeys and just how intelligent they are. A couple of things worth noting about the New World monkeys is that they're almost exclusively arboreal. They very rarely come down from the trees, and this is because they live in rainforests where they have an abundance of food. But this also means that they've developed a special adaptation that allows them to reach out onto the very tips of the branches in order to acquire their food, and that is the grasping or prehensile tail, which essentially acts like a fifth limb and allows them to really hang on and suspend themselves by their tails to get to fruit at the ends of the branches. The Old World monkeys, because they are more widely distributed, geographically speaking, they occupy a diverse range of habitats. You'll find them anywhere from the Japanese mountains, where we see the snow monkeys, as we see in this picture in the top left, to more urban areas like in India, and even in the Middle East. A few things worth noting about the Old World monkeys is that the Catarrhine monkeys have a different shaped nose, and this is one of the things that distinguishes them from the New World monkeys. Their nostrils are closer together and their noses point downwards. This is also the human condition. In contrast to New World monkeys, which have very little sexual dimorphism, meaning very difficult for us humans to distinguish between males and females, in the Old World monkeys, there is more sexual dimorphism, so it's a bit easier to be able to tell the males from females, because males tend to be a bit larger. Unlike the New World monkeys with their grasping tails, the Old World monkeys have sitting pads. They're called ischiocallosities. They're rough patches of skin on their bottoms that help to kind of provide cushioning. Primates tend to adopt an upright posture in a lot of their activities, and the Old World monkeys, because of the diverse range of habitats in which they live, have developed this feature to really help them maintain their comfort and upright posture. The Old World monkeys can be further divided into two different types of groups. One are the Cercopithecine monkeys and the other are the Colobine monkeys. Let's take a look at some of the differences. So the Cercopithecine monkeys include baboons, macaques, and guenons, and these are kind of your typical monkeys. The majority of these species are found in Africa, although the macaques have a pretty wide geographic distribution. They have an omnivorous dietary pattern. They're dietary generalists, and again, this is a huge advantage because that means that they will take advantage of a variety of food resources. If one is in short supply, they simply turn to another food resource that's available to them. But an interesting anatomical feature that's developed in these monkeys to help them exploit a range of food resources, and because they are out in particularly in competition with other types of animals, they have these cheek pouches that allow them to store food. So they can come down from the trees or from wherever their groups stay together, go out and forage for food, and particularly in savanna-like contexts, like for the baboon, they're able to put a lot of food into their mouths and store them in these cheek pouches and then run back to the trees for safety. This leaves them less vulnerable to predators and reduces conflict with other species. The other group of Old World monkeys are the Colobine monkeys, also known as the leaf-eating monkeys, and they consist of the African colobus monkeys and the Asian langur monkeys. And unlike those dietary generalists, Cercopithecine monkeys, these leaf-eating monkeys specialize in eating leaves. This is a really kind of low-quality food source, and so these monkeys have developed this important anatomical feature that allows them to extract as much nutrients as possible from the leaves that they eat. So they have a specialized stomach that helps them to break down and digest the cellulose in those leaves and really to extract a lot of nutrients from them. We call them banquet feeders because unlike the cheek pouch monkeys, which go, stuff their cheeks, and run away, the banquet feeders, leaf eaters, just simply reach out a hand and have an abundant food supply. So they tend to stay in one place for long periods of time. Now, in a way, this leaves them vulnerable to predators because it means they have very predictable activity patterns. Their predators know where they can find them because they do stay in one place. So here are a summary of the differences between the New World monkeys and the Old World monkeys. So if you ever went to the zoo and didn't look at the information plaque that tends to accompany the exhibit, you could simply look at very specific features in the monkeys to determine if it comes from the New World or if it comes from the Old World. And one feature would be looking at the shape of the nose. The New World monkey has the flat, widely spaced nostrils that point outwards, whereas the Old World monkeys have those downward, closely spaced nostrils. New World monkeys can suspend themselves by their tails, so they have the grasping tails. And Old World monkeys, although they do have tails, they do not grasp, but they have the sitting pads, which again help them to maintain upright posture. In the New World monkeys, again, very difficult for us to be able to determine between males and females because they don't differ in body and tooth size too much, but that's much more noticeable in Old World monkey species. In terms of teeth, if you looked at the dental structure of a New World monkey, you would see that it's got 3 premolars, whereas Old World monkeys have 2. And in fact, the Old World monkey pattern is exactly the same number of type of teeth as humans. The New World monkeys are mostly arboreal, whereas the Old World monkeys occupy a range of habitats. And because the New World monkeys live in tropical rainforests, they tend to be mostly frugivorous, whereas the Old World monkeys, due to the range of habitats they occupy, tend to be more omnivorous. This is a really important slide because by separating apes and humans apart from the monkeys and classifying them into this superfamily called the hominoids, we're making a very important biological and evolutionary statement, which is that apes and humans have more in common with each other than they do with monkeys. That is, apes are more similar to humans than they are to monkeys. And here are some of the characteristics that help make that distinction. The apes have a larger body size, and they don't have tails. There's increased brain size, and along with that, intelligence, which we see reflected in increased social complexity. And finally, another important anatomical difference is in the shoulder anatomy of the apes. Apes have this rotating suspensory shoulder that allows them to suspend themselves from beneath branches and to perform that arm-over-arm swinging action known as brachiation. So it's kind of funny how that common playground staple, the monkey bars, no monkey can actually suspend itself from beneath a branch or from those bars and perform true brachiation. So really we should be calling those ape bars. Let's meet some of the species of apes. And here, this first group, known as the Hylobatidae family, are also called the lesser apes because they depart from that general ape pattern that we just covered, mostly because of their size. And this group consists of the gibbons and the siamangs, which are found in Southeast Asia in tropical forests. They are the smallest of all of the ape species, and they're entirely arboreal. They move by brachiation. In fact, they're expert brachiators, and you can see this illustrated in the photo in the top left, where the gibbon has a very elongated arms and shortened legs. They have very flexible wrist joints and a precision grip that allows them to perform that brachiating action. And they're some of the most daring arboreal acrobats. They're highly frugivorous because of the fact that they live in tropical rainforests. And because they live in such dense forested areas and spread themselves out quite a distance to avoid competition, they also tend to use vocalizations so that they are able to broadcast their home range and their territory because they oftentimes can't see one another. So they're very loud. And in fact, if you were to make a visit to the San Francisco Zoo, they do have siamangs there. And you'll hear them immediately when you step out of your car into the parking lot because their vocalizations carry so far. Here are the great ape species, and they are known as the Pongidae family. And the first species that we'll meet here is the only great ape species that exists outside of Africa, and that's the orangutan. So it's sometimes called the Asian ape or the Asian great ape. And, anthropologists are interested in language and what it tells us about how people view the world. And in Malaysia, or in the Malay language, orangutan means person of the forest. So that gives you a clue as to how the local people view the orangutan. They are very geographically confined. They're only found in the Southeast Asian islands of Borneo and Sumatra. And even though these are large apes, they are fully arboreal. In fact, not only is the orangutan the largest arboreal primate, it's the largest arboreal mammal. Orangutans are great problem solvers, and they exploit food resources that other types of primates don't. For example, they're able to extract honey, and they've been observed using tools to extract termites. Again, these aren't unique behaviors, but they're definitely complex behaviors. As you'll see in the gorillas as well, we see a lot of sexual dimorphism among males and females, so it's very easy to tell differences between the two because males are so much larger than the females. And unlike the other great ape species, the orangutans tend to be solitary. They don't live in social groups. The only time they really interact with one another is for mating purposes, and the young orangutan stays with its mother for a long period of time. So you will see that unit together, but outside of that, they're not very social. And they are one of the most extremely endangered primate species. Again, due to habitat loss, as their homes are being cleared to make way for palm plantations, which provide a really important ingredient for processed foods, palm oil. That brings us to one of my favorite primate species, the gorilla, which is the largest of all living primates. And he's really the gentle giant of the primate world. Gorillas are found in forested regions across Central and Western Africa, in the yellow zone depicted in the visual up at the left top. And there are two species, the lowland and mountain gorillas. Now, gorillas are primarily herbivores, that is, they're mostly vegetarian. They do like fruit, but they're definitely not meat eaters. Because of their large body size, gorillas have to use knuckle walking to support their upper body weight as they walk quadrupedally. They do live in family groups, usually consisting of a dominant male, silverback, juvenile blackback males, adult females and their offspring, and the females leave the group when they're sexually mature. And again, we have a very threatened primate population among the mountain gorillas, which currently number around 600. And this has remained relatively stable over the last decade, and that's partly due to a conservation success story. Because gorillas used to be poached by the locals because of such extreme poverty in the regions where the gorillas live, that was a huge source of income for some of these local people. And a lot of conservation advocates were able to train these poachers to protect the gorillas and to lead tours to see the gorillas because they're so docile and non-aggressive. And so the poachers who used to kill the gorillas are now the ones who protect them because they've learned that they're worth more to them alive as a sustainable source of income. Gorillas are truly magnificent primates, and if you ever get a chance to visit the zoo, you'll really get a sense of just how amazing they are, and it's just to behold them is really wonderful.
We'll be watching a number of videos on chimpanzees, so for now these slides are just meant to give you some general background to introduce you to our closest genetic relatives, the chimps and another species, the bonobos. Ian Tattersall, an anthropologist, points out that chimps are so similar to humans in so many ways. They bond, they quarrel, they reconcile, they deceive, they murder. They make a variety of tools, they even self-medicate. They live in complex societies, constantly vying for status within those structures, forming intricate alliances that even border on the political. And chimps are very intelligent, and you'll get a sense of just how similar they are to us while watching the videos.
Another species of chimp known as the bonobo, is another one we'll be watching some videos about. So again, these are just to give you an orientation to this species of chimpanzee. And they differ from common chimpanzees in their appearance and also in their behavior. Of the two species of chimps, the bonobos are definitely more prone to bipedality. They're more likely to stand up and walk on 2 feet than common chimpanzees. They're very comfortable using this form of locomotion. And another thing that makes them a lot more similar to humans is the way that they use sex to form alliances, to form to increase their political status, to gain acceptance, and also to relieve tension. So in the video you'll be watching, you'll see the various ways in which bonobos use sex as a way to really cement social ties. So bonobos and chimpanzees are probably our best models of behavior for understanding how human behavior evolved at a time when our earliest ancestors did not have culture, did not have spoken language, and these are really good models for helping us to have that window into the past. By now, you should have a pretty good sense of just how similar humans are to other primates and to the great ape species in particular. This slide documents some of those similarities, but it's important to understand how humans are different. We'll be exploring how culture became our primary means of adaptation as the hominid lineage evolved. And some of our most important answers to the distinct features related to our humanity are going to come from the field of genetics. As you read in the article, Why Can't Chimps Speak and What Makes Us Human, we're already identifying sets of genes that distinguish regions in the brain and specific anatomical features that allow us to produce speech and to comprehend spoken language. And although the bonobos are the only primate species besides us to not confine sex to the most fertile period, this is a distinction between humans and other primates. But the defining feature of the hominid lineage, the human family tree, is the fact that humans and their bipedal ancestors were the only truly habitual, not just primates, but mammals. This one feature is going to set our ancestors on the path to humanity.